This video is going to talk about regression. For this video, we're actually going to be talking about specifically quadratic regression, but regression can be used for many different types of equations, as in you can use linear regression, exponential regression, cubic regression. We're going to talk about quadratic regression. So regression, what regression is an equation. Regression is an equation that models the data points the best. What that really means, you might have heard before, it's called the line of best fit. This is for if you're dealing with linear equations, you have line of best fit, but this will be the quadratic equation of best fit. It's the equation, the graph that goes through the data points the best, because not all data points will line up perfectly with the equation. Sometimes you'll have points that are above and below the line, so the line of best fit actually goes through the points to where the points are as close as possible to that line, but they might not be on the line exactly. So with quadratic regression, we're going to be dealing with parabolas that will be of best fit. You'll know that you're doing regression if it's asking you to model data. So it's modeling data. Modeling data. I'm going to highlight this because this, again, is what you'll generally see when it asks for regression. Now I'm going to open this up and I'm going to show you the first example. I'm going to show you how to do regression. And there are two types of calculators we want to make sure we can use. Is for the older calculators and then the newer calculators, because you do the same things in the calculator, but the way you do them is slightly different. So this first example says write a quadratic function in standard form. We don't have any of the A, B, or C. It does say quadratic function, however, in standard form. So that means we need to have an A, a B, and a C, because it goes y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We don't have the A, B, or C, and there are two problems here that we're going to do. So what we need to do is find our A, B, and C using our graphing calculator. So in our graphing calculator, we're going to end up pressing our button Stat, Edit. We're going to enter our X's in L1, our Y's in L2. Then we'll go back to Stat, Calc, Quadrag, because we're doing quadratic regression. But then this is where our calculators will deviate. Now, if you have the older type of calculator, as soon as you press the quadrag, your calculator for the older calculator, so for the old calculator, it'll end up looking like this. Quad, reg, and then your cursor will be blinking right beside it. I'm going to put a little box, or a little red box here, because this is where we're going to do our math. That's where we're going to actually type in something new. Now, in the newer calculators, again, it's after you press the quadrag. The newer calculators will say something slightly different. It'll come up with a whole list of things. Your calculator will actually say X list, Y list, frequency list, and it'll actually say F-R-E-Q list. Then it'll have store reg EQ, so that means store regression equation, and then it'll say calculate. Now what you have to make sure, again, if you have the newer calculator, in the X list, you need to make sure it does say L1, which it should automatically if you've done everything right, and your Y list should say L2. You do want to make sure that it does say that. If it doesn't, you do need to fix it. You're actually going to skip over frequency list, but what we want to do, this red box for the old calculator, we want to do the same thing, but we have to make sure on the newer calculators to put it in the correct spot. The newer calculators, you have to put it right here at that store regression equation. Once we have our cursor in these locations, so the old calculator, your cursor's already there, But in the newer calculator, you just have to move your cursor down to store regression equation. Once you have it in those locations, you can then press these next steps in your calculator. I'm going to write them in red because that's going into the red box. You press the buttons vars. Then you'll press the button yvars. You'll actually have to go over to yvars. Once you get into the yvars, you'll press function. You'll press enter on function. Then if we're doing just one equation, we can press enter on our y1. Sometimes if you're doing multiple different equations, you can actually change that to y1, y2, y3. But since we're only going to be dealing with one equation at the moment, we'll just focus on y1. Then once we've gotten to the y1, we'll press enter. Now for the older calculators, it'll automatically go to your answer. For the newer calculators, it'll actually come back to this screen, and you'll just have to go down to calculate. So I'm going to put calculate. These are our steps that we're going to use. Now I'm going to use these steps on these two problems right here to make sure that you can see how they're done in both the new and old calculators. So starting with the older calculator, I'm going to do this first problem right here with the older calculator. And what I mean by older calculator is the software is slightly older. So then it might look the same as some of the newer ones, but the software is slightly older. So I'm going to turn my calculator on. I want to look at my parabola, and I have to make sure that parabolas have 3 coordinates minimum. I have 1, 2, 3 coordinates, and these have actual values with them, so I can use those. So the first step is to press stat and then go to edit. So on the calculator, I'm going to press the stat button, which is right here. And it's already on edit, so I'm going to just press enter on edit. Now I have an L1 and an L2. This is where I want to put my values. So in the L1, I put the X values. So my X values are at -1, so I put -1, enter, so it goes down. I have a 0, enter, and then I also have a 3, enter. Then in your L2, we're going to put our Y's in our L2. So pressing over to L2, I'm going to put the Y values that associate with those X values. So at the X value of -1, the Y value was at 2. So I press 2, enter. The X value of 0 the Y value was at -2. So I'm going to put -2, enter. And then for the X value of 3, the Y value was also -2. So I put -2, enter. And this is what your screen should look like. Since it looks like this, we should be good. And do you notice that our coordinates, they match up? We don't have any too low or they're mismatched with how many numbers there are. We have to make sure that we have the same amount in each column. So now that we have our X's in L1 and Y's in L2, we're going to go back to the stat button. So I'm going to press the stat button again, right here. But then it says go to calc. Now here's your calc right here. So we're going to press over to calc. Then we want quadratic. Now I do want to mention that there are a whole bunch of different types of regressions. This is linear regression, quadratic regression, cubic regression, quartic regression. There's another linear regression, but the slope is in the end of the problem instead of at the beginning. So that's the only difference between those. There's also a natural log regression and an exponential regression. Now again, we're going to focus specifically on quad reg, so we're actually dealing with number 5. So I'm going to come up here to number 5, quad reg, press enter. Now again, this is my older calculator because it's the older software, and it says quad reg, and my cursor is flashing right beside it, which is exactly what I want it to do. So since it's in the correct location already, I can go to this red information down here and type these in. So I'm going to click vars, which is right here beside the clear button, vars. Then it tells me to go to yvars, so I just want to press over to yvars. I want to press enter on the function, which is already on the function. I want to press enter on y1, so I'm going to press enter on y1. Then now it goes back to this screen. I just want to press enter. Now what we have, here's the quadratic equation, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And what we have here is we have our value of A, we have our value of B, and we have our value of C. So this is what our screen looks like. It's the same screen. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, a equals 1, b equals -3, and c equals -2. Now that we have these values, we can actually plug our a, b, and c into this equation and have our quadratic equation. So our answer here, write a quadratic function in standard form, is for this graph. Our quadratic function is y equals, our a is 1, so it's 1x squared, because I'm just plugging it into this equation right here. I'm just plugging in the a value, but I'm keeping the x squared. And then it's plus bx. Now our b is -3, so it's really minus 3x. And then plus c, our c is -2, so it's -2. This is the equation for this graph. Now again, this was the older calculator. We would end up getting the same information with the newer calculator, but I'm going to show the newer calculator on this part. So you'll end up getting, obviously these graphs are different, so our equations will be different for these two parts, but you would have gotten, with the new and the old calculator, you would have gotten the same answer for this first problem. So for the second problem, we're going to do the same thing, but this time we don't have anything in here, so we're going to actually list them out once we have our numbers in here. Okay. So again, we're going to go back to our coordinates. We have to do our stat edit, and we're going to put x's in L1, y's in L2. And as you can see here, we have our lists that are blank, so we can go ahead and put our numbers into that. So for our L1, we know we're supposed to have our x's, so I can go from 0, 1, and 2. So I can go ahead and put those in here. 0, 1, and 2. Then for the y values, the 0x goes with the y value of 3, so I put 3. The 1x goes with the y value of 5, so I put 5. And the 2x goes with the y value of 3. Now in quadratic, you have to have 3 coordinates to be able to do quadratic regression, so always make sure you have 3 coordinates. So I'm going to go to a newer calculator, and it looks just like my older calculator, but the software is slightly different. So I'm still going to go to my stat key. I'm still going to press edit, because that's what it says up here, stat edit. I'm still going to put my x's in L1. So my x's were 0, 1, 2, so 0, enter, 1, enter, 2, enter. Then I'm going to put my y's in L2, so I'm going to press right and go to my y's, which are 3, enter, 5, enter, 3, enter. So now my screen looks just like this, so I can continue on. I'm going to press stat again, the stat button. I'm going to go over to calc. And again, I want to do quadratic. So my calculator has looked the same for all of these so far. I'm going to go down to quadratic and press enter on it. Now, here is where it deviates from the last type. Now, instead of it just saying quadratic, we have this entire list of things. In my x list, I do have my L1 because my L1s is where I had all of the x values. If that's changed, or if you accidentally delete that, you can come down here. You see where it says L1 in blue right here? You can press the second key and press L1. And then in the Y list, should say L2 because that's where we put our Y values. And again, if that ever gets deleted on accident, if you are not careful about it, sometimes you can delete it. You can come down here where it says L2 on number 2. You can press the second key and then L2 and it brings that back up. So as long as those are in there, we should be good. So we're going to skip over frequency lists. There's nothing that we need to put in there. But we need to go down to store regression equation. This is where our cursor is going to be blinking. Now it's the same thing we did on the last calculator. We're still going to press the vars button right here. We're going to go over to yvars. We're going to press enter on function. We do want to put it into y1. We don't have to put it into y1, but it's good to use. And then it goes back to the screen. Now, instead of just pressing enter, we actually need to go down to calculate. So pressing down. You see how it says store regression equation is in y1? That means our equation is in y1, and I'll show you what that means in just a moment. So we're going to press enter on calculate. And we still get that same screen we had before, where it says quadratic, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, but now we can fill in our a, b, and c. So our A value is negative 2. I'm going to put in negative 2. Our B value is 4. And our C value is 3. So now that we have our A, B, and C, we can write our actual equation. So our equation is y equals, it's ax squared, so it's negative 2x squared, plus bx, so it's going to be a positive 4, so plus 4x, and then plus c, which is a positive 3, so it's plus 3. This is our equation. This is the equation of best fit for this parabola, and this actually is the equation of the parabola. Now what I want to explain is why we do this y-vars. Y-vars. I have both calculators up here. Now these are for question 1 and for question 2. Okay. So the older calculators, if I press y equals, this is actually the equation for it. Now this is obviously rounded. It's 1.00002. So that's really 1x squared. And then this is negative 3 point all those x, and then minus 2. So these do round to 1x squared minus 3x and then minus 2, which is what we had here. Now the reason why we did the vars, y-vars again is because on our y equals, we'll have those values. Now in the newer calculators, you do scroll to see all of them. This is negative 1.99999, so that's really negative 2 x squared plus 3.999, so that's 4x plus 3.000, so plus 3. So these equations are in there. The reason we want to see that is because now if we press graph on both of them, graph on this first one, I should get this graph. Graph on this second one, I should get that graph. The reason I'm showing you this is because if you don't do the vars, y-vars, you won't get that information. And I'll show you on this newer on the older calculator. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press second plus 7, go over to all, 1, 2. I'm resetting all of my memory. I'm going to do this problem again. That means that everything has been cleared out. Everything has been cleared out. I'm going to do the same thing on this one. So I'm going to press second plus 7, go over to all, 1, 2. And so now I have both of them cleared out. So if I go back to my y equals, none of them, there's nothing in my y equals. There is nothing in my graph. There is nothing in my list. Nothing in here. So I'm going to quickly do these problems again. I'm going to do this problem. So I'm going to have my negative 1, my 0, and my 3. So I have 2, negative 2, negative 2. I'm going to do the same problem on here so I can show you the difference. So negative 1, 0, 3. I'm going to have 2, negative 2, negative 2. So I'm going to still press stat on both of them. Stat, calc. And I want number 5 for quadratic. Now again, two calculators are slightly different. This calculator, I'm going to go to store regression equation. I'm going to hit my vars, y-vars, enter on F1, enter on Y1. I'm going to go down to calculate. And I get my equation. Same equation I had from here. Now this one, I'm actually going to skip that. I'm going to show you what happens and why it's important to do vars, y-vars. So I'm going to say, oops, I accidentally pressed enter. I didn't do my vars, y-vars like I'm supposed to. So I'm going to press enter. I still get the same equation. But the reason why it's so important to do the vars, y-vars is because when I press my y equals, this one has it. This one doesn't because I didn't do my vars, y-vars. So if I press graph, this one will graph it. That one doesn't. And you can look at the scatter plot by going to second y equals, so the stat plot. We're going to turn on, so press enter on plot 1. We're going to press enter on the ons. We want to make sure that it is the dots. We have L1, L2, and we just press enter, keep those the same. Now I'm going to press graph again. the same dots, but this one actually shows the equation, the parabola going through it. This one does not. The reason we want to do this is because even though these equations were nice and easy to use, what if it rounds and you have a very long decimal? You want to do the vars, y-vars to put the equation into your y equals automatically. One other thing is that when you press y equals, if you're graphing something and it has plot 1, that means you have to have stuff in your L1 and L2. If you don't, that's when you get an error on your graphing calculator. Okay? So again, the vars, y-vars is crucial because you want to make sure that the graph actually goes through the points and you want to actually see the equation in your calculator. If you don't do the vars, y-vars, you never see the graph itself in the equation. So this is how you do quadratic regression. You take your 3 coordinates, you plug them into your L1 and L2, stat, calc, you do quadratic regression. Again, you can do it for any types of regression. If it asks for linear regression, you would just click linear regression instead. Then you have to make sure that you put your cursor in the correct location depending on which calculator you have, and you press vars, y-vars, enter on function, enter on y1, and then you go to either enter or calculate.